Hello everyone and welcome to lesson 4 of our 5-day challenge. So we're nearly through and well done for making it this far, and thank you very much for all your positive feedback and all your hard work. I really appreciate it. So today we're going to look at overviews. So we did overviews yesterday. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to review that a little bit and show you my overview. Then we're going to look at how to write accurate details paragraphs. So this will be the main focus of the lesson. And we're going to focus on line graphs because we've been doing that all week, and I want to stick with that so that by the end of the week, by the end of the 5 days, you'll be completely confident, totally confident that no matter what line graph comes up, you'll be able to handle it. And then I'm going to give you the fourth task. So the fourth task is going to take you a little longer. It's going to take you 20 minutes to do, or 20 minutes or under to do, because I'm going to give you a whole question. So let's review what we've done this week. We looked at how to understand the task. We looked at structure and paraphrasing. Yesterday we looked at how to write a clear overview. Today we're going to finish off the essay or the task 1 report with our details paragraphs. And then tomorrow we're going to look at vocabulary and grammar. The reason why we're going to look at vocabulary and grammar is it's 50% of your total mark. And I have the feeling, because I've done this many times before, that I'm going to look at your task 1 reports that you're going to do today for me, and I'll say, you understood the graph well, you structured it well, the paraphrasing is good, the overview is good, the details are good, but you really need to work on your vocabulary and grammar. It's 50% of your total mark, so it's really important, so that we're going to work on that. So just before we get into the lesson, a lot of you have been asking me, can you help me with writing task 2? Can you help me with reading? Can you help me with speaking? Can you help me with listening? Can you help me with grammar? Can you help me with all of the other types of task 1 questions, like process diagrams and maps and bar charts and pie charts and multiple charts? And yes, absolutely, I can help you with that. But I'm not going to be able to help you with that today or tomorrow, because I want to focus on one thing at a time. I've found over the years that students who try to, look at too many things at once tend to not do so well. And the answer to all of those questions is my VIP course. So on my VIP course, we cover absolutely everything, and everything is waiting there for you if you decide to join. However, there are only unlimited number of places available on that course. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to mention it for the rest of the week. And what I'll do is I'll create a video on Saturday, and I'll tell you all about how to join it, and I'll open it for everybody, a limited number of spaces for everybody on Saturday. So wait until Saturday if you need extra help. Okay, so line graph overviews. So armed robbery decreased, assault increased, murder unchanged, and this is what we did for the one that we showed you the other day, so yesterday. Overall, the number of armed robberies decreased sharply, assaults increased slightly, and homicides remained relatively unchanged across the entire recorded period. And then I gave you this question, and I asked you to create your own overview for this. So if we look at this is what I would think if I was looking at this graph. So Europe is the black line, and it increased dramatically or sharply. It doesn't, both mean kind of the same thing, so don't have to worry about that. But if we look at it, it increased, and it increased quite a lot. The USA, it increased also, but it increased more steadily than Western Europe. And China fluctuated, so it went way up and then way down and then way up and then way down again. So that's a sign that it fluctuated. So what I would do is I would note these down, or I would just think about them, and then I would be able to clearly put these into my overview. And here's my overview. Overall, from 1870 to 2003, the cost of corn increased dramatically in Western Europe, steadily increased in the USA, and fluctuated wildly in China. So what I've done here is just take the key features for this graph and put them in a clear overview. So we started off with overall. A number of you didn't do that when I looked at your samples. It's not a big deal, but what it does is it just indicates to the examiner, this is my overview, and you're kind of screaming to the examiner, this is my overview, and making it very clear that this is what you're talking about. So it's a good idea to put in here. From 1870 to 2003, I'm just making it very clear that I'm talking overall. You could say over the entire period instead. And very importantly, the cost of corn. So what a lot of you did was you put overall Western Europe increased, USA increased, and China fluctuated. So China didn't increase. Western Europe didn't increase. The USA didn't increase. The price of corn in the United States, in Western Europe, increased. So there's, to be totally accurate, there's a bit of a difference there. A number of you said China and the USA both increased. That's fine. What we're going to do on Friday, tomorrow, is we're going to look at how to use adverbs like dramatically and steadily and things like that. To make your writing a little bit more precise and a little bit more accurate. Some of you put that China remained steady because I think your thinking was that it started here and it ended up just above here. However, if you look at the graph, it does go way up and way down and way up and way down. So if you put that it remained steady, that wouldn't be correct, or it remained unchanged, that wouldn't be correct. You would have to put that it fluctuated wildly. And we're going to give you the chance to do another overview at the end of this lesson. So if you got a few things wrong, don't worry. You'll be able to redeem yourself in this lesson. So we've covered the structure, the introduction. We've covered it already. We've covered the overviews. Now we need to complete our task 1 report by doing 2 details paragraphs. Okay, so the details. So we now must write our details paragraphs. Here are some things that you must consider when writing details paragraphs for a data source. So this is for line graphs, but also bar charts, tables, pie charts, multiple charts. These things should be considered for any data source. So first of all, do not include everything. What students do is they just write every single piece of data that they can see. The question asks you to select, to summarize. So that means that it is as much a process of picking out the correct data and reporting it than just, writing out absolutely everything. Make sure the data you do report is accurate. This might seem very, very obvious, but it's something that students don't do as well as they should, because it's really quite easy. Really all you're doing is just reporting exactly what you see. So it's more just about avoiding silly mistakes and avoiding being careless, and because it does eat into your marks a little bit if you're reporting inaccurate data. Organize your data logically, so we're going to look at that in this lesson also. So just making your data easy to understand. And make sure your data is clear and easy to understand using grammar and vocabulary. So we're going to look at that tomorrow, but we're going to look at also a little bit today. And make comparisons where necessary. So you don't always have to put in comparisons, but sometimes it is relevant and it is appropriate to do so. So let's look at the first one. Do not include everything. So a lot of students would see this, and what they would do is they would write about let's take armed robbery, and they would write about 2003, then 2004, then 2005, then 2006, then 2007, 2008, and they'd write about every single data point. Now, if you do that, A, you're going to run out of time, and B, you're not answering the question properly, so because the question asks you to select the main features, to summarize the main features, not report everything. So how can you decide, how can you pick out the data that is relevant and leave the data that is not? So let's have a look at this. So let's focus on armed robbery. So if I was looking at this chart for armed robbery, what things would I include and what things wouldn't I include? So what you do with line graphs, and again, this is different for bar charts and pie charts and whatnot, but with line graphs, what you do is you just split it up. So what I would do is I would write about this. So I would talk about from here to here. But then what I would do is I would talk about this part. So I would talk about from here to here. So from 2004 to 2008. So I don't have to talk about absolutely everything here, but I would say, in 2004 it was around 3,750 and it dropped sharply to just over 1,000. Then I would write about here. So a year later it went back up to around 1500, just under 1500, and then it remained steady at around 1500 until 2012, till the end of the period. So you can see what you've done here is you've just broken it up and you've made it just easier for you to deal with and easier for you to write about. So what would we do for assault? So the red line. So what I would do is I would write about this period. So I would say it started off at about 2,250 and then it declined to just over 2,000. Then it went up steadily to around 2,750. All right. So what you're doing is you're just splitting it up again. For murder, the yellow line, I would talk about here, then I would talk about here, and then I would talk about here. All right. So you're limiting the number of things that you're talking about. All right. So we're going to show you what these paragraphs would look like in a moment. But hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully that makes it just much easier to talk about. So you're not talking about absolutely everything. You're just talking about the key information. All right. So accurate data. So you really, really do lose marks and you throw away marks, is a better way to say it, is if you look at something and you add in the wrong date or the wrong number. Also a problem is with many of the graphs, it's difficult to tell what the exact number is. So instead of giving accurate numbers, exact numbers, what we can do is we can give approximations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what this would look like in a real details paragraph. Okay, so 2003, so this is a key piece of data because this is where it starts. It's just under 3,500. So I don't know the exact one, but I've used the approximation just under. 2004, that's a key piece of data, approximately. All right, so it's around 3,750. So that's accurate. But if I wrote 3,750, that's not accurate because we don't know that exactly. Then we're going to look at 2005, which is around 3,000. 2008, just over 1,000, and 2012 nearly 1,500. So you can see these approximations, just under, just over, approximately, around, nearly. These will help you with your accuracy, and it will help you avoid, because I've had some students who just completely panic and freak out, and they're like, why didn't they tell us exactly what this is? That's not fair. Well, what they're trying to do is to see whether you can cope with that and see whether you can use approximations. So let's put all of this. So we looked at this before. So let's look at what this, so using this technique and then using approximations, let's look at what this would look like in a details paragraph. So there were just under 3,500 armed robberies in 2003, and this rose slightly to approximately 3,750 a year later, before falling sharply to just over 1,000 in 2008. A year later, the number of incidents increased to nearly 1,500, so just here, and remained relatively unchanged until the end of the period. Okay, so you can see what I've done there. I haven't talked about, I've only talked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years out of 9. So, around half of the stuff I left out. But what I've done is I've selected the most appropriate data, and what someone would be able to do is someone would be able to read this, and if I took out that green line, if I removed that green line and gave them this paragraph, they'd be able to plot that line pretty accurately without having the graph with them, without being able to see it. But they don't need all of the data to do that. So that's a good way to think about it. What I used to do with my students when I worked for the British Council and taught face-to-face in the classroom, I used to do things like this. I used to remove lines, get their partners to write the paragraph, and then get their other partner to try and draw it accurately. And if they could, that would mean that it was a very accurate paragraph. And you would do exactly the same thing with assault and exactly the same thing with murder. You don't always have to use approximations. So for example, with tables or maybe sometimes bar charts, you'll be able to see exactly what the data is. Pie charts as well, you'll be able to see exactly what it is. But with line graphs, they're very, very useful for helping you with the accuracy of your data. So number 3, Organize your data logically in your details paragraph. So number one, always think of the reader. So the reader is the examiner. So you're not thinking of the examiner in terms of impressing them. What you're doing is you're just thinking about, why do you write something? So why do we write anything? We do that to communicate clearly with the reader. All right. So communicating clearly with the reader, and that will allow us to communicate clearly with them and make everything very, very easy for them. If your organization does not help the reader understand things more clearly, you've not organized your details effectively. So this is what you should be thinking about when you're looking at the data. So which things do I include in the first details paragraph? Which things do I include in the second details paragraph? And in what order? And your criteria should be, what makes it easy to understand? How you do this will totally depend on the data you are given. There are no cookie cutter methods for this. If there were cookie cutter methods, I would give it to you. But it just doesn't work in that way, because you do not know what data you're going to get or how the data is going to be organized. You have to make this decision by yourself. But if you think logically and you think clearly about how to organize everything, and usually it is the most obvious way, all right? But it requires you to look at many different questions and look at this more deeply in order to be totally confident about doing this. So number 4, make it easy to understand. Grammar and vocabulary are tools that allow you to clearly express meaning. That's all grammar and vocabulary is. Just allows you to communicate clearly. They are not there for you to show off how many words and phrases you've memorized. Okay, so they're not there to show that. All right, so these people that memorize phrases and memorize words and just insert them into their task 1 report or their task 2 essay, what happens? They make lots of mistakes. It's very, very unclear. They get a band 5, a band 6, something like that. Focus on accuracy and clarity. All right. If your task 1 report has mistakes in every single sentence or multiple mistakes in every single sentence, you will make it very hard for the examiner to understand what you're trying to say. All right. And that is going to not only lower your mark for grammar and vocabulary, it will lower your mark certainly for coherence and cohesion, because if something is very difficult to understand, it's not coherent. So many people think that, oh, all I have to do is do very, very well in coherence and cohesion and task achievement, and it doesn't matter what my grammar and vocabulary are like, I'll get a high score. That shows that it is nonsense. Also, if the examiner can't understand what you're trying to write, then they don't know whether you are reporting the data accurately. So that can also affect your score for task achievement. So that's something to worry about also. So we're going to look at this in more detail in tomorrow's lesson. So tomorrow's lesson is all about grammar and vocabulary within the task 1 academic context, and we'll have a look at this more tomorrow. So number 5, make comparisons. So note that you do not have to make comparisons unless it is necessary. So a lot of people see comparisons in the instructions. It's in the instructions for every question, but it says, you only have to make comparisons where necessary, where appropriate to do so. Again, every data source is different, so there are no cookie cutter methods. There are no ways to say, you have to make this exact comparison for this type of question. It doesn't work like that, because every type of question is different. For line graphs over time, the key features will be trends over time. So your main focus will not be on comparisons, but you still might make some comparisons. Depends on the data. For bar charts and pie charts, you're more likely to focus on comparisons, just because of the nature of the data. For example, a pie chart, by its very nature, is comparing things. However, you can make comparisons in line graphs if appropriate. So let's look at how you might be able to do that. A simple way to make comparisons is to simply use comparatives. So Barcelona are better than Real Madrid. That's a comparative structure. I am taller than Jim. Jim is shorter than me, for example. Superlatives. Barcelona are the best team in the world. You're talking about something being the best, or the top, or the most. So how could we add a comparison in here? All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about 2004 being the highest. All right. So how would we do that? We'd simply add a non-defining clause in here which was the highest number of crimes recorded in a single year during the whole period. So that is a comparison, because we're comparing this data to all of the other data by saying it was the highest number. And we've simply used a superlative structure and a non-defining clause to add that in, and that is appropriate in those circumstances, and very, very easy to do. But just as I mentioned previously, it depends on the data. Like, not every line graph is going to be like this. You have to think on your feet. So those are all the things that you need to consider when writing details paragraphs. And what I would like you to do now is look at the following line graph and write a complete answer. So what I would like you to do is write your introduction, your overview, and your 2 details paragraphs. I will post the question because some of you don't have fast internet connections, so sometimes it's a little bit blurry. So I'll post it below in the comments below the video. So here's the question. Let me read this just in case it's not completely clear. The line graph above shows the number of people who moved from 4 countries in Europe to the United States of America. So we have here the dates: 1867, 1877, 1887, 1897, and 1907. And the 4 countries are Ireland, here in black, Norway in red, Spain in blue, and Greece in yellow. And here it goes from 0 to 12. And on the y-axis here is the number of people multiplied by 100,000. So not 100,000, so this one is 100,000. This one would be 1.1 million because you're multiplying it by 100,000. So I'll post this question below, and what I'll do is I will look at your submissions and give you feedback on them in tomorrow's lesson. Please do this. As I said before, I'm not your dad. You're not a child. I can't really force you to do anything, and I don't want to force you to do anything. But, from my experience, the people who do the tasks, the people that do the work, do much, much better. I don't want you to fail your test and have to repeat and waste a lot of money and waste a lot of time, and it's very, very stressful. So, it is solid advice that I'm giving you. So, up to you. So tomorrow we're going to finish off with lesson 5, and we're going to look at grammar and vocabulary within the task 1 academic context. Very, very important lesson because this is 50% of your total score. So really what we've been doing this week is we've been looking at the other 50% in the first 4 days, and then tomorrow we're going to focus on the other 50%, your grammar and your vocabulary. Thank you very much, guys. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow, and look forward to seeing your task 1 reports. Thanks, guys. Bye bye.